everybody. Welcome to the City Girls Pod. And this is the show where we're looking at Sex in the City and the back episodes. We're having a lot of fun. And today we are really excited because we are not only covering 3 pretty fun episodes, but we have a special guest with us today. Last week, we talked about the blog, the Carrie Bradshaw is the worst.com, and which we thought was hilarious and we enjoyed it very much. But today we have the creator of said blog with us. We have Reva Lucia here. And I'm so excited to get to hear her perspective on these episodes and more why Carrie Bradshaw is the worst.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Yeah, it's gonna be so fun. And I'm Filker Reach Wagner, and Jax is here.
Yes, this is so cool. Having a podcast is great because interesting people that you want to talk to, you can just invite them on and then you actually get to have a conversation.
Yeah. It really is a lot of fun. And we do have to give our normal warning. This is a mature podcast, mature show. Especially these 3 episodes are pretty.
Yes.
So if that's not for you, we got tons of content on this podcast that you can listen to and enjoy. So, but we want to get to know you a little bit better. Reva, tell us a little bit about yourself and also how you became a Sex and the City fan or not a fan. I don't know.
Yeah, give us info.
Yeah, so I live in Orange County, California. I've lived here for almost 9 years. I'm originally from the East Coast. My day job is in advertising, and I have been married to my wonderful husband for almost 4 years. I started watching Sex and the City when it was in syndication because when it first started, I probably wasn't even allowed to watch it. But yeah, when I lived in Chicago, my friends and I would watch it and we were like, wow, Carrie's really selfish. So we would just, when we wanted to talk about ourselves, we'd be like, hey, can I be Carrie for a minute and talk about my problem? And that was just our thing. And then it was about a little over 3 years ago, I was just watching, I don't even remember which episode, but I was like, she's terrible. I'm going to start a website and just talk about how terrible she is. I like the show overall. I really do. She's just a fundamentally terrible person. So I thought it would be fun to write about.
Well, and I saw that you didn't really get through and just like that. So did you feel like that didn't make her an any better person?
I didn't. I actually, I still have 2 episodes left of the original series and I am going to finish And Just Like That. It's just, I feel like it's worse than I ever could have imagined. So it just might take me a little bit longer. And it's not just Carrie. I found she's actually had some better moments in this series than the original, but like, kind of the character assassination they did of Miranda, I'm not a fan of, and the alcoholism that came out of nowhere, and just some of the awkwardness there, and and
then was solved out of nowhere too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She's like, I guess I'm just gonna sip water now, and it just it was not my favorite. I've watched the whole thing. I've only written about I think the first 2 or 3, and I will get to the rest. And then people have asked me to do the movies, which I will do when I can figure out how I want to structure it. But definitely gonna finish it And Just Like That. I'm just not sure on the timing.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Carrie got a little bit of redemption in And Just Like That, and like Miranda's the worst in And Just Like That.
We had the odd situation of starting with And Just Like That as far as our recaps, and then deciding to do Sex in the City, because when I first suggested that I did to Jax, I was like, I don't know if people, Hallmarkies podcast will be interested in this, but then it did really well. And so we decided to keep going.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They want some racy content too. We're all for the P and PG rated content, but a little PG-13 and sometimes R.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. There's especially in that one scene with and Just Like That with Miranda and Che in the kitchen.
Oh, that was so frustrating, that scene.
It really was. It really, really was. And for a variety of reasons, but also just poor Carrie has to go to the bathroom and she can't.
Yeah. Like, what a horrible friend.
Yeah, well, there's a blog dedicated to that.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you can still appreciate the show, even if you think that Carrie is the worst. I I mean, as our official Carrie of the podcast, Jack, how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I hope and pray that I'm not as selfish as Carrie or as annoying. I'm okay if I'm as annoying, I guess, but like I don't want to be as selfish as she is a lot of the time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I think that is so much I mean, we have this in a lot of rom-coms too. It's like whoever the central character is, it's very much about their problems and their unloading and all these things. But Carrie does bring a lot of toxicity into her romantic relationships. I actually think she's a pretty decent friend, even though she's constantly talking about herself. But I think that really the romantic relationships is where we see some really bad behavior.
Well, and it is true that typically the lead protagonist in almost anything is usually the one that everyone's the hardest on because it's way easier to like the Han Solos and the the Hermiones and the sort of the side characters that come in and come out and make everything fun. It's harder a lot of times to like the lead character.
But what I will say is Sarah Jessica Parker, I think, even when Carrie is peak annoying and so infuriating that you just want to scream at your television screen, I think she does an amazing job. Like that's why the show is so iconic. I mean, all the women that are in the show really do.
Yeah, she does an amazing job. And also watching the first episode we're going to talk about when she's on the beach, I was like, I never had abs like that. That's not fair. Like, and she also like looks good in everything she wears. And yeah, it's so she does have redeeming moments. In fact, in the first episode, we're going to talk about like almost right off the bat when she's trying to comfort Charlotte. I think she does a really good job there.
Yeah. I think that she's a flawed character, but I like flawed characters because that makes them more human.
Exactly.
So, but let's talk about the first episode that we're going to cover. So Was It Good for You? And this is episode 16. And basically Charlotte goes into crisis mode because her partner falls asleep mid-coitus and she freaks out. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like she major overreacts to this because he's a doctor and doctors are super tired all the time. And but she is very upset. And I did think it was a great line when she's talking to Carrie. She says, has anyone ever fallen asleep while making love to you? And Carrie says, no, but I'm sure some of them wanted to.
Yes. Yeah. That was exactly the line I was thinking of. It was such a great line.
That was really funny.
Yeah.
And Samantha says, who we are in bed is who we are in life. I've never met a man bad in bed who was good in life.
Yeah. And then of course, poor Samantha, I mean, at least Charlotte's not there to be assassinated by Samantha, but she's like, have you seen her on a treadmill? Of course it's her.
Oh, I know. She says she doesn't do any movement from the waist down. I was like, oh, I can see Charlotte on the treadmill, like working it out, but nothing's happening downstairs.
In this episode, so she has this crisis and she gets right on it. She's like, okay, what do I have to do? What class do I have to take? What's going on? And at the end, she's like, that was the best $50 I ever spent.
And she signed them all up with her.
She doesn't just kind of whine and complain about things. She gets it done. She figures out a solution and I like that about her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she really does get it done. Like literally, figuratively, she gets it all. It all happens for her and for her man.
Yeah.
Yes. And we never see him again. He was I already forgot his name, even though I watched this episode yesterday because he never comes back.
Bram Walker.
Okay.
Bram Walker is his name. And really, I mean, I just feel like he's a doctor. Doctors are super tired. She shouldn't be so upset. But
yeah. But I feel like Charlotte is very, at least in the beginning of the original series, she really ties her self-worth to her relationships. Is she in a relationship? Who is it with? Is he, as Carrie would say of the Hamptons guy, is he good on paper? Like she's very tied up in finding that perfect man. So I think that it's just her personality to overreact to a situation like that.
True. So Samantha is invited to be in a threesome with a gay couple that is her friends, and evidently neither of them has experienced a woman, and so they want to do this. She's a bit hesitant. I don't know. I mean, surprisingly, she's a little bit hesitant for her. I would think that I mean, didn't we had the whole episode on threesomes and she seemed totally into it then, right?
Yeah. I wonder if with David and David, she's just a little bit like, okay, they are gay. How is this going to go for me? Like, I do think she had an inkling of where it could go, but they are very attractive and they're very good friends. So I think she's like, well, why not?
I mean, maybe that's harder to do something like that with. I mean, we talked about on that episode that like would it be harder to do it with friends or with strangers? The both. I mean, I can do any of this, but
Okay, Charlotte.
but yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Reva?
I think, and I'm not speaking from experience, but I think strangers would be easier. So if it goes horribly wrong, you never have to see them again.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas if it's three friends and it goes horribly wrong, there's going to be some emotional repercussions. So I would say strangers probably, but I think I would be hesitant as well, because it's like, yeah, how would that work for her? You know, how would that work for me? How would that work for her?
Yeah, I don't know.
And as we find out, it doesn't. So
it doesn't sound like a good time to me, but
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, David and David, they wimp out in the end.
Yeah. They want to get, what do they want to get? Ice cream or something? They're like,
Yeah.
let's go for gelato.
Yeah, go get gelato.
Which I thought was really sweet. And also like, I thought it was very telling that like they're kissing her neck, they're touching her boobs, they're into it. And then when they go downtown, there's an issue. It reminded me of, and it didn't get this far, but it reminded me of the summer that I worked summer stock College Night Opera Company. And this man, I'm not gonna say his name in case he's listening, but he was gay, but we were just like laying in my bunk bed together one night and we were making out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I was not very experienced at the time, but like, then like once things started getting a little like hot and heavy, he was like, yeah, this isn't for me. I was like, oh, okay. Okay.
Aww.
But he was, oh my gosh, guys, he was the hottest. I'm getting red thinking about him. He was the hottest guy at College Light Opera Company, and he's happily married to a man now. So I wish them nothing but the best.
Aww, that's great.
There you go. You did a good thing.
Good kisser though, good kisser.
So we find out that Miranda is up in her sheets game. The Florentine peach, which they looked like nice sheets, but I would pick a different color.
How much do you think they cost? Because Carrie's like, you would spend this amount of money on sheets?
Oh, sheets can be really expensive.
Yeah.
Hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
And it was funny because my mom always is TJ Maxx. You can find incredible deals on really nice, like Egyptian cotton, super nice sheets at TJ Maxx. My mom is like the sheets queen. She finds these great sheets at great prices. And anyway, and it was just kind of funny. One time my brother-in-law, he was like, I never cared what kind of sheets I had before joining this family. He's like, no, I can't. I have to have the
You can't go back.
Yeah. So once you go, you can't go back.
Yep.
It makes
so true.
Sense. But I didn't love the color, but I did think it was super funny. If you build it, he will come. That was really funny.
Yeah.
And this is also great on this show too, that the writing is so masterful. The way they orchestrate these episodes, it's like people who are having issues in bed, and even Miranda's is like about her bed. Like, I just think they find a great way to tie everything together with a common theme in sometimes really kind of quirky, interesting ways that you wouldn't automatically think of.
Yeah. Yeah. They do a good job of making you laugh at these characters' expense.
Yeah. And they kind of flip it too. Like, so at the end of the episode, it's Charlotte that is confident. And, Samantha's like, she has her arms crossed and she's like, well, what was wrong with me? And they're like, they were gay. What was wrong with you is that you don't have a penis. And she's like, not getting it. And, it's like hitting her self-esteem, which is so un-Samantha. So I just thought it was funny how there was a little bit of like a role reversal at the end.
Yeah, that was good. And I mean, speaking of, and just like that, I mean, they just could never get over the loss of not having Samantha there.
Agreed.
They just needed her there, and obviously that wasn't going to happen. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I love in this scene with Carrie, like the first scene when they're talking about Charlotte, Samantha's dropping some serious wisdom and even like cutting Carrie down size a little bit when she tells Carrie, like, for a sex columnist, like you're pretty like closed-minded when it comes to, you're thinking about sex. And then also talking about sexuality in the new millennium is going to be less about labels, but more about sexual expression. It was like, yes, Samantha, you go, girl. Like very forward thinking for that time, especially, and even forward thinking for now. I hope we get to more of a place where that is the case, because I think that it would be easier for everyone, because then there's less oppression and people feeling bad about who they are. And we can not focus on that as much as I think that it was like when this show came out.
Yeah, I actually felt the exact same way. So I actually watched all these episodes yesterday twice, like once in the afternoon and then once at night. And I was thinking, I was like, that was very forward thinking of Samantha. And she always was when it came to sex. And I don't know which episode it was, but she's like, I'm a trisexual. I'll try anything once. And like, she's just she is very forward thinking and is the last person on earth to judge anyone. And that's what I really like about her.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, so Carrie starts dating this guy named Patrick. They have kind of a meet cute, which I'm like, how could that cigarette have possibly, like this tiny little butt have possibly bothered her? She acted like she was ready to go to a burn unit.
I know. Yeah, it was a little over dramatic, but and also like it was just like coincidentally good aim since he wasn't even looking in her direction. So it was just like, it was kind of funny.
Isn't it kind of shocking going back how much Carrie smokes?
Yeah. Yes. Also, I have a question. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but when he like apologizes and he's like, let me take you out to coffee. And she's like, okay, there's a place 2 blocks away. Was he like ditching someone in the restaurant? Because he's like, you can't smoke in the restaurant. So he's outside smoking and then just leaves with Carrie.
He probably was. He's like, you know what, hot blonde, I don't care that like I'm only 11 months into AA and I'm leaving whoever I'm with behind.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel bad for whoever you just ditched, but I was like, and that thought only ever occurred to me yesterday. I was like, wait a minute, something is missing here.
It's true, and he probably didn't even pay his bill either.
Right?
True.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a dine and dasher. Oh my gosh. So Patrick, they go on a couple of dates and she's doing the lean in and he's not reciprocating. She's like, what is going on? And it turns out he's super nervous because he's never had sex sober. And then once they do have sex, he just is super excited about it. And I really liked Patrick. I thought that he was a fun character. I thought the actor did a good job. I thought they actually had pretty good chemistry. I thought it was a good little romance of the week for Carrie.
Yeah, it was unfortunate because because he did, relapse when she didn't say I love you after like a week and a half. But I thought it was interesting when she said you don't love me, you love like who you are when you're having sex with me sober, something along those lines, which I think is true. And he sort of like took this on as a new addiction. And so I think that was, something that she couldn't handle. But I do wish, I think that in a different circumstance, they would have made like a better couple. No. They did have a lot in common and they did have a lot of chemistry.
Yeah. And I do want to say that for once, because I'm not frequently impressed by the way Carrie handles her interactions with her suitors. But I actually thought that what she told Patrick right before he relapsed about, like, no, we're just taking the night, but call me tomorrow, call me tomorrow. I actually thought that was a very mature, kind way to approach the situation. She didn't want to feed into it anymore, but she didn't want to cut him off and leave him high and dry because she knows what he's going through and because she cares about him. So I actually thought she handled that in a really great way, but unfortunately he did relapse and he yelled some really nasty, like, clearly he needed to stop drinking because he's not only drinks too much as an alcoholic, but he's a mean drunk too.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
which is
and one of the
unfortunate.
things she also did, to your point, that she handled really well, she said you should go to a meeting, and I don't, he
Yeah.
probably didn't, but he probably should have. And so, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the show Mom with Allison Janney and Anna Faris, but I love that show. And they're always like, when they're always upset, they're like, let's go to a meeting. And it's like this support system for them. And so when she said that, I was like, I know he's not going to, because I know how the episode ends, but yes, he should have. And that was good advice on her part.
Yeah. And I do like that she asked us, I've always wondered if he was able to stay sober, and was I really that good?
I'm going to guess no, only because
Not.
he having sex for the first time sober, he probably would have reacted that way to anybody. I'm not saying that she's bad, but I don't think this reaction was specific to her, is my
Well,
guess.
I felt like it was a little sarcastic when she said that. Like, was I
Yeah.
really, so but my only flaw with this relationship was, again, more terrible fashion from Carrie. I hated those pink velour pants that she wore. Those are so ugly.
Yeah.
And she's got all these terrible tanks, all these tops that are just so, I guess that was a thing, these horrible halter top tanks. That must have been a like 1999 thing. Oh,
Yeah, I'm sure it was like on the cutting edge of fashion when she was wearing it. And it's like, she looks good in it, but she could look good in anything,
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
She's like the only person that could pull that off. And there are like many outfits, I feel like, throughout the series where she's the only person that could wear that.
I did like her. She had like a tropical dress kind of that was cute, I thought, with that had like a big silver belt. And of course, she's sporting the Carrie necklace, and that became like a huge thing.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
That was like her thing.
You got to have a necklace with your name in 1999. All right. Well, the last part of this episode was Charlotte decides to go to this tantric workshop, and it's pretty intense. And it's funny to me that this is the one thing that is too much even for Samantha. She just can't deal with it. But Samantha can be a bit of a prude sometimes, in the sense of people that are older, or people that are I guess not traditionally handsome, like she with the Polish couple, which
yeah.
in the previous episode, I figured she would be kind of up for that. They'd be super fun, but or the old man that she dates for a little bit, or
the old rich guy, and she runs out when
guy.
she sees his wrinkly ass, and she gets scarred for life and runs away.
Yeah.
I would think that she would be a little more open to stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, especially because, do I think that, I'd be comfortable sitting in this tantric workshop with the hands-on demonstration? Probably not. However, like, there is something beautiful about it, in the sense that you are imparting this teaching, and this thing is going to make yourself and your partner feel good on to people who want to learn. And she has clearly a vibrant sex life with her husband, which I'm not saying that you need to be in a monogamous relationship to be having sex with someone, but I think that it is, as far as tantric workshops, it's maybe like as close to wholesome as you're going to get. So
Well, also, like, what do you think you're signing up for a little bit, like, why did they go? I don't really understand. I mean, I guess just to support Charlotte, but I really don't understand why Carrie and Miranda went.
I think it was to just support her, and I think she guilted them into it a little bit at brunch. But yeah, it's like, what am I signing up for? You're kind of going into something like that a little blind.
Yeah. But it ends up being quite the affair. But Charlotte says the best $50 she ever spent. So I guess it worked.
Also, let's do the quick math on that there were like maybe 8 women there. I mean, and it was an hour and a half session. So I guess they're not doing too badly to like get to, roll around in the hay there for like an hour and a half and make $400.
Yeah, something like that.
I believe that exists totally in New York City. There's totally those workshops.
Rachel, next time you come.
I'm so far away from needing that really.
Well, what about in Orange County? Should be.
Oh no. No, I don't think there's anything like that in Orange County.
Definitely in New York for sure. Well, it was awkward, but I did laugh, I have to say. What will you give this episode, Reva, 1 to 10?
I have to be honest, this episode is one I routinely skip if I'm randomly rewatching. So I would say maybe like a 5.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jax?
I would give this one. I love that litmus test of that. It's one that you skip when you're rewatching. That's a good. Okay, this isn't one of my faves either, but I would still give it like a 7.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. 7. We'd like to take a second from this episode of the podcast to celebrate our sponsor of this episode, and that is the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast?
Do you want an inside scoop into what happens on the podcast?
Do you want early access to episodes and loads of cool perks?
Now is the time to become a patron of Hallmarkies podcast.
By becoming a patron, you get to access our patron Facebook group.
You can request episodes or even be a guest on the podcast.
And most importantly, any patron can join our monthly movie watch-alongs with stars like Paul Campbell, Natalie Hall, and more.
It's as low as $2 a month to join in and become a special part of the Hallmarkies family.
Please consider, and we will love you forever.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Right, let's move on to the next one. We have 20-something girls versus 30. And I've said a bunch of times on this show that I feel like they treat our girls more like in their 20s versus their 30s. So this is an interesting episode. I would say this is like young 20s versus older 20s, because I think the just in most realities, by their 30s, one of these 4 girls would have a partner, would be married, would be starting having families, and it's just so much harder at that spot to have this same kind of dynamic that they have in their 30s. So I don't know. This is an interesting episode, but they decide to go to the Hamptons, and they have different experiences in the Hamptons with these 20-somethings that Charlotte meets, because she starts with this guy Greg, and then there's a big kind of ending with Big. But overall, what do you think of this episode, Reva?
I really like this one. I think there's a lot of parallels, like in the beginning when they're at that bonfire party with the keg, and Carrie makes a remark like, 20-something girls are so sweet, they'll hold your hair back when you're puking, which is something Miranda does for her at the end. So that kind of comes full circle. But the encounter with Big and Natasha is so painful for her. It's also very awkward. At the same time, they do a great job with it. And I really do just like this episode too, especially when Samantha introduces Greg to Nina. She's like, I really think you two would hit it off.
Yeah, that was funny.
I had forgotten about that she did that. And I was like, justice.
Yes. Justice for Charlotte.
What did you think of this episode, Jax, overall?
So I told a story on the podcast a few episodes ago about the guy that I stalked from MySpace, Anson Mount, and he's Greg in this episode.
Oh my God.
So he and I went on like one date, and then he went on dates with a few of my friends, but he's an actor. He still lives in New York, I think. He's done a bunch of stuff since Sex and the City, but it was fun to see him when he was like a lot before I met him. I thought this episode was really fun and especially interesting because I just read this article in the New York Times by this woman named Emma Goldberg, and it's called "The 37-Year-Olds Are Afraid of the 23-Year-Olds Who Work for Them." And I just thought that was so iconic for what was happening with Nina and Samantha. And you're like, Samantha's not afraid of anyone. Why is she afraid of Nina? But then we see that Nina, in fact, has a lot of power, but she doesn't know how to use it responsibly or follow through.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like this episode would have been better as the season finale.
I agree.
Yes. Well, we'll get to the next month's season finale, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so I agree, except I really like the end of the season finale, like the last few lines. I know we'll get to, so I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, there is something about just her seeing them at the party that maybe that would have been a good first episode for the next season. The finale, I mean, would have been good first episode of the third season.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Because just ending on this meetup with Big and her finding out, and meeting Natasha, I felt like just that would have been a really good kind of cliffhanger for the second season. But it starts with them deciding to go to the Hamptons. They kind of don't want to go at first, but they all agree. And then Charlotte meets this guy, Greg, on the jitney. And this did make me want to go to the beach. I've been trying to scheme and plan and go to the beach this summer, but I swear everyone is super, super busy. And I don't know. I can go to the beach by myself, but it's just you don't have anybody to watch your stuff when you're in the water. I don't know.
Honestly, that's the biggest thing, because you and I have discussed before, we like doing things alone, but the beach stinks because you don't want to take all your stuff to the bathroom or to go get food like every time.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it did look like a fun place to me.
I don't think I've ever been to the Hamptons, and now I'm like, oh man, I really want to go. Like every time.
I didn't know the Hamptons was such a college town. I had no idea. I thought the Hamptons was like Ina Garten and super,
Yeah, I thought so too. Like, I didn't know that there were these kind of parties that we're seeing.
So Carrie meets this girl, Laurel, at one of the parties, and she says, "I worship you." And I think it does seem a little bit strange that somebody like Laurel would be so into Carrie's column.
Yeah. Yes. I think when they're at that book signing or whatever, Carrie says, "What is it exactly you like about my column?" Because Laurel's talking about, saving herself for marriage, and Carrie's column is all about sex. So I thought that was, a strange thing to worship, but
the only thing that I kind of related to a little bit with Laurel is that I, with maintaining some level of privacy, I'll just say that I was not as active as sexually as most of my friends, but I was always the one that was like, tell me everything. So I always wanted to not even live vicariously, because it was a choice I was consciously making, sort of.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know all the nitty gritty details. The only thing is I do agree with you though, that it doesn't seem like Laurel wants that. It seems like it's just this weird hero worship of Carrie. And as much as I'm a fangirl and I am an obsessive personality and I get really into things, I found Laurel so annoying. I didn't find her endearing at all.
Yes, and I agree with that. And especially she like shows up to their house unannounced that they're renting. Miranda's like, Carrie, your groupie can't stay. Like she was asking too many questions. I sent her upstairs, and it's like that's a little bit over the line, I think, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I could picture being interested, but not like a fangirl. I don't know. That's the thing. As a 41-year-old virgin, I can relate to Laurel in some degree, but I don't know. I would find it hard to believe someone like that would be like a super fan of Carrie's column. But
Rachel, you are, let me just assure you, you're nothing like Laurel.
Yes.
You're not annoying, delightful. Good job to the actor though. The actor was great. Like she nailed the role. I know that's what it was supposed to be, but woof.
She did nail the role, because I honestly, I don't even know the actress's name, but I'm like, I if I ever see her face, I'm like, oh, that's Carrie's, groupie.
Rachel Miner is her name.
Okay.
I'm looking to see if she's on
Sorry, what's her name?
Rachel Miner is her name. She had a good run on Supernatural. So good for her. She was on Sons of Anarchy. Hey, she's kept up. She's working. Way to go.
Good for her. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I loved Dr. Bradley. I thought he was so great and charming and handsome.
Yeah, and I felt so bad for him. I felt so bad for him, right?
Yeah.
Because she was clearly not interested. And one of the things I think I actually pointed it out in the blog when I wrote about this episode is when they're walking on the beach and he asked her to dinner, she's like, oh, I can't ditch my friends. And I'm like, you ditched your friends for Big constantly. So it has to be the right person, obviously. But I was like, and then she ends up spending the night with him just to get away from Charlotte. So I was just like, I felt so bad for the guy. Like he deserved better.
But he was so respectful of her, and I don't know, I thought he was really funny and charming, and I was just like, you should forget Big and start hanging out with this guy.
Yeah. Well, I think, Reva, I think that's a really good point about like she's ditched her friends before. And it's like, yeah, this is just like a casual supper on one of the many nights they're going to be in the Hamptons. And she thought instead of ditching her friends, it was better to then tell Dr. Bradley Meego about Charlotte's crabs. Yeah. I would never tell someone that I was newly dating, or really anyone, about a friend's.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't even tell like another close friend or my partner. Like I will say the only thing I didn't like about Dr. Bradley Meego was the fact that Carrie kept saying Dr. Bradley Meego, and it annoyed the heck out of me for some reason.
The only thing that I thought maybe she was telling him because he is a doctor and wanting to get some treatment of some kind for Charlotte, but that was the only part of it that made, I guess, some sense to me. But yeah, the whole I can't abandon my friends is stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, they would not care at all. They would totally be up for it, supporting. So yeah, that didn't really make much sense.
Especially because Charlotte spends all her time with Greg. She's like off the reservation with her 26-year-old. So Charlotte wouldn't have even noticed.
Right. And I did think it was funny when Samantha's like, is that the guy from the book party? I've got to start reading.
Yes.
Funny. That was good. Yeah. And so we also have the Hampton Hoedown, which made me laugh. That reminded me of the dance for dyslexia, and all of those things.
Yes.
And Samantha, at the beginning, she has this assistant named Nina, who is a nightmare, terrible. and assistant, and turns out she took her basically whole Rolodex of clients and invited everybody to this hoedown, and she's doing a terrible job of managing the hoedown.
Yes. And Samantha rescues her with the fireworks, which I was a little confused about the fireworks. I guess I knew they were supposed to be later, but I just didn't understand the panic, although I'm not in PR and I know that things have to be timed perfectly. I'm assuming, but yeah, Samantha comes to her rescue graciously. So I thought that was nice.
It felt like at the party, the fireworks were the least of her worry.
Yes. Yeah.
You agree, Jax?
Yeah, like, girl, I mean, we're lucky the fireworks are happening. You were like running out of food. People are climbing all over each other. Like, it seemed out of control and a little gauche.
Yeah.
And what the heck is beef jerky carpaccio? That makes no sense. Carpaccio is raw. It's thin, and it's like beef jerky is just beef jerky. Carpaccio is beef jerky. It was just like a giant piece of beef jerky. I was like, what?
It was like tied together.
Yeah.
So weird.
So she does say this is the biggest threat 20-something girls posed was to themselves. So I don't know. I mean, obviously I can't relate to this whole version of 20-somethings because I didn't party at all. I went to the school that I went to, the college I went to has been voted the most stone cold sober college in the country every year for like forever. So
like, that's not a title we're giving up. We're holding on to this.
Yeah, they're proud of it. And we did have a lot of fun, but we didn't need to drink a lot and have this kind of parties. So I don't know. This is just not something that would define my 20s. That's for sure.
Well, I think something that I didn't find relatable is that I'm in my 30s and I don't feel contentiousness to women in their 20s. I feel like I want to protect them and mentor them and love them. And
yeah.
And when I was in my 20s, I was friends with a lot of women in their 30s, and I didn't feel like they had that kind of contentiousness for me, or like there was any conflict. I don't know. So I don't really relate to this a ton. Like, what about you, Reva? Do you?
Yeah, I don't really relate to it. I do agree that like, when I was in my mid to late 20s, I lived in Chicago and like we would party all the time. And so I think that sometimes you could be threats to each other, in certain friend groups, especially if there are guys involved. But in terms of like, I had a job where one of the women that was in sales, she was like a great friend and mentor to me. And she was in like her late 30s and what I feel was not threatened by me at all. And so I feel like I was my own worst enemy in some cases with the decisions I made and, kind of making friendships for the wrong reasons and things like that. So I can't relate to it and feeling threatened, on either side, right? I'm 40. Oh, so I don't feel threatened by people that are 25. And when I was 25, I didn't feel threatened by people that were 40. So I feel like I've been lucky in having, good mentors and stuff like that career wise.
Well, and it might have helped me a little bit, the fact that, so I have way younger siblings. I have a sister that's 18 years younger than me, brother that's 16 and a years younger than me, and a sister that's 10 years younger than me. And so I've always sort of interacted with and been friends with people of all different ages, not just my own school year, I guess. So I think that maybe helped a little bit with me with that, but I don't know. I just feel like you don't have that many friends in the world, so you can't really be that judgy of people of their ages or whatever. Yeah. I did think that this tube top that Carrie wore was so ugly. I hated it. Also, brown.
Her skirt looked like a really thick tablecloth, like folded in a weird way.
It was
Like if
so
if it hadn't like her skirt could have worked if it had been not like folded up on that one side. I don't know. It was weird, but and the hat was of course
yeah.
in with the theme, but not something that she should wear again.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that that's actually what made the ending so much more painful and cringe and embarrassing is that yes, she looks hot. Like we've all said, she can look beautiful in anything, but she also looks silly.
Yeah.
And you're all having a party together, you're fun, you're all wearing the hats, it's one thing, but then we have Big and Natasha who are like in their Hamptons white linen, and the juxtaposition of it was just, I felt embarrassed.
Yeah.
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 So
I felt embarrassed for that and another reason, which I'm sure we'll get to.
yeah. So she sees Big at the party at the hoedown, and he's there with Natasha, who we talked about in And Just Like That. And I kind of felt like, why is she so surprised that he's dating people when she's dating lots of people? I mean, she had the Justin Theroux guy that she dated for enough to be like her boyfriend. She's had a number of like actual relationships since she broke up with Big.
So I have a theory, if I could possibly share
Yeah,
it, which
please.
it actually occurred to me maybe like last night. But so I think that the reason she was surprised is because there were only two scenarios with Big that she could ever handle. One is that he goes to Paris and never comes back, so she doesn't have to think about him. Two is that he goes to Paris and realizes he can't live without her and comes back together. And so this third scenario that she wasn't thinking about and couldn't possibly handle is happening right in front of her face. So I think that it was just not something that she would ever have been prepared for. That's my theory.
That's a really good point, because I think you're right. As much as we know she wanted to be with him being in Paris and not being able to be here was, like you said, at least a manageable thing in her head. I like that.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think you nailed it. But yeah, it is when she finds out that he's engaged, that they're engaged, that is rough because he was so hesitant to commit with her. That's tough.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking for her, for sure.
Yeah. It did remind me of When Harry Met Sally, when she says he didn't want to marry me. And
which that monologue by oh my gosh, Meg Ryan. I'm so sorry. That's the last miss that I was forgetting her name. When you do want to marry me, I'm like, that is just iconic. She's
yeah.
And when she's like, I'm gonna be 40, and he's like, in 8 years.
But it's there. This episode did feel very Nora Ephron-y to me, actually, with the way it was sort of commenting on things, and she was so brilliant in the way that she would work in these little monologues into her scripts, and you could tell that she started out as a journalist, as an essay writer, because she would like things like the whole monologue about Starbucks and it creating into finding a sense of self. You've got mail, that's the kind of thing she was so brilliant at. But anyway, I did also, just a little thing, I kind of wondered, is this the first real appearance of the Cosmopolitan in this episode? I mean, they've drunk, but I feel like this is the first episode that it's been specifically mentioned, Cosmopolitan, and that was such a thing in the show.
Yeah, and that they're really sort of like hammering it home here that that's like her drink.
Yeah.
I don't remember them making as big of it. Yeah, she was drinking them, but it wasn't like this iconic signature thing that they were like telegraphing in the episode.
Yeah.
So
because all I can figure right now is when she calls Big when she's like wasted and it's like 5 a.m. in Paris and she's drinking something, and I don't know if it's a Cosmo, but it's in like that glass, and she's like, I am a woman, and like spills it on herself. That's all I can think of right now.
Oh my gosh, that scene. And then Big is so he's like, okay, woman. I'm like, oh, you're all gross. You're toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have 4 more seasons of it. So
yeah, that's right. Buckle
The
up.
the episode ends with Miranda helping Carrie throw up, which according to Carrie, that's like the ultimate sign of friendship. So that was actually kind of sweet.
Yeah.
So what would you give this one, Jax? 1 to 10?
I really like this one. And Reva, I love the way you said the thing about when you're watching and you skip. That's actually good. That's a great test for, the episodes you like. And when this one comes on, when I'm rewatching, I'm like, oh, I like this one. So I would give this one an 8.5. I really like this. I think there's a lot happening. It's a lot of fun. And I love when the gals get to go somewhere different together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's I think I'd give it an 8. I think I'd give it an 8. What about you, Reva? What would you give it?
Yeah, I think I would give it about an 8. 8 sounds good.
Good. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
Yeah.
All right. So then we have the finale of season 2. It's called X and the City. And the main point of this episode is the question, and talk about Nora Ephron-y. This one was also very Nora Ephron-y. Is the question, can men and women just be friends, particularly with your ex? And Carrie decides, I'm going to try to be friends with Big. She calls and schedules a lunch, and it doesn't go all that well. But I thought, again, very Nora Ephron-y, the whole theme of the way we were throughout, and the whole Hubble and Robert Redford and everything in the two types of women being simple and complicated. I thought that was all really well done. And she says, your girl is lovely, Hubble. It was great. I thought it was very well done. I don't know. What did you think overall of this one, Reva?
So first of all, poor Steve, the very beginning of the episode when Miranda's running away from him and then he shows up at her apartment to call her out on it. Like, I love that part. But yeah, overall, I like the episode. I do think it was well done. I do think it is, very hard. Like, the last scene is like kind of hard to watch. And also, even as someone that thinks Carrie is the worst, like, I do feel bad for her. I really do, because it's heartbreaking when you find out someone that you were with for a long time is marrying someone else. Like, I get that. So, it's definitely, and I've never seen The Way We Were, so I can't comment necessarily on that Hubble stuff, but I will say the only thing that bothers me is if they're implying that Natasha is any way plain or simple. I don't think that that's true, but I don't know. She's just, she's trying to make herself feel better, but I was just like, she works at Ralph Lauren. She's beautiful. Like,
yeah.
So that's, I don't know necessarily think you can do like, there are only two types of women, but I do understand what they were doing with this episode.
Well, just even if you haven't seen the movie, I think, again, going back to the Nora Ephron, where like in Harry Met Sally, they're all talking about Casablanca, and in Sleepless in Seattle, when they talk about An Affair to Remember, or the guys are talking about The Great Escape, and getting all emotional and everything. in You've Got Mail with The Godfather. I mean, she did such a good job of kind of working in these themes from these classic movies into her plots and into the dialogue. And I feel like you're getting some of that here. I mean, we think about it, this show came out the same year as You've Got Mail. So it was really like prime Nora Ephron season, or now.
Yeah.
I think. And so I think that you can see some of that kind of influence. And I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about implying that the implication that Natasha is simple or plain, because well, like you said, Reva, she works for Ralph Lauren, and the interaction that we've had with her, there's nothing to suggest, even though it was brief, there's nothing to suggest that she doesn't have substance. And it's really upsetting that as women, we feel like we need to tear other women down. And look, I'm not saying I always have the most healthy outlook on things, but I found that in my past relationships, if you feel like you need to tear someone down, go with the person that you used to date. Like, talk about how crappy they are, because you do. I mean, we all have things that are negative and positive, but I've never really gotten much joy or even really delved into talking badly about the new people I've dated or with, because I just don't know them, and it seems petty.
Well, Natasha says, "Oh, I've heard so much about you." Really? I find that hard to believe that Big is like chatting it up about Carrie all the time.
And and I will say too, like when I was in my mid to late 20s in Chicago, and there's this one guy, and we never like actually officially dated, but like he just flat out did not want to be with me, and I, instead of like accepting it, I was like, I would like latch onto this specific episode and be like, well, I'm too complicated. It has to be him. Like, I'm too complicated. And like, I'm like, it's like whatever helps you sleep at night, I guess. But I didn't, he didn't really date other people either. So there wasn't, but I wouldn't have been like, oh, what does she have that I don't? It was just more like, I guess I just put it all on myself and on him, but not like any, another party. But it is, to your point, like, doesn't it make sense to tear other people down that you don't even know? And so I don't know if like you guys went there, but like just when they were talking about it, I just thought there was some implication that Natasha was like playing, and I just didn't like that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
that's fair. That's fair. I don't think that I could be friends with an ex. I mean, we talked about it last week that like at this point, if I were to have a relationship and then it not work out, it would be so painful because I've never really had one. And so I think especially for me, I just don't see how I could. Maybe way down the road, but certainly not a year. This has been a year? Not a year later. No way. I don't think I could. I don't think I could. And I'm also not somebody who just has a lot of guy friends. I don't know why. I just never have. My friends have always mostly been girls for some reason. So even just kind of having this guy friend, let alone them being my ex, would probably not be that likely. But I don't know. What do you think, Jax? Do you think you can do it?
Well, especially what you're saying too, like in that instance, you might also have feelings for them still, or they have feelings for you. Mm-hmm. I think it definitely depends. I remember being very confident that my long-term boyfriend, we were together for like 6 or 7 years. And I was like, oh, we can be friends. We can be friends. And we tried to stay really tight friends for like a year, but like, then we really couldn't move on. And now I'm very comfortable with where we're at, where it's like, we text each other on birthdays. We've seen each other at other people's weddings. If something happens, like if someone in my family is sick or someone in his family is sick, like there's like a text, but it is a very controlled friendship. And I don't think that I could be super tight with an ex or someone that I had that kind of history with. Friendly, sure, yes, but yeah, especially the way Carrie is with Big, that friendship will not work out. It's not like someone you dated casually once upon a time ago. It's a very intense connection. What do you think, Reva?
Yeah, I have some really good guy friends, but we've never dated, and there's never been any interest on either side to date. And so those are the best friendships that I have with men. But no, absolutely not. Like, it's too complicated. I will say though that there was one guy, we just went on a few dates, and we were able to be friends and kind of get past the awkwardness, but he was like a rare exception. And I think because it wasn't serious at all, that we were able to do that. So it depends on the situation, I guess. But overall, I would say no, there's too much emotional baggage. And especially with Big and Carrie, like they try to have friendship like 85 times in the series and it never works.
Yeah, and even I want to ask the two of you because I was thinking about this, and there are certain friendships that maybe can work, but if I was Natasha, I wouldn't feel comfortable with the kind of lunch that Carrie and Big have in this episode. And it's not that I'm absolutely comfortable with like people socializing with the opposite sex, or it's nothing like that. It's just like this feels very intimate and flirty to me, at least, but maybe that's just me being jealous.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is when she, finds out they're engaged and like flips out on him, and she's like, you strung me along for 2 years, and now you're marrying someone you've known for 5 months. And even in the Hamptons Hoedown, she's like, how old is she? And he's like, I don't know. So you don't even know how old she is, but you're engaged to her. So does she even know the history he has with Carrie? Maybe he fabricated it down a little and said it wasn't as serious. And so she has nothing to worry about. Like, for all we know, Natasha thinks they dated like a couple times, and I think it becomes evident later in the series that that's not the case in terms of what she knows. But in this particular episode,
I mean, evidently Big's talking about her, Carrie, all the time.
Yeah, it's all he talks about in Paris. The person he didn't invite to live with him.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I feel like it's kind of unrealistic to expect. But maybe from Big's perspective, he's had so many partners at this point, and he seems to still be friends with them. Like, remember we had the episode with his wife, his ex-wife, who was the publishing person.
Little Kathy with the cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So good. I loved her. Again, how does Big reel in these quality women?
I know.
Yeah. So maybe it seems more realistic to him, but I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do it. And then to invite her to the engagement party.
Oh yeah, that was just tacky.
Very tacky. Yeah. It's kind of like in 500 Days of Summer, because people are now all of a sudden like saying that like that Summer's the good guy, and I can't forget his name, but with George, just
I don't know his name in this.
Anyway, that guy Tom, I think his name was Tom. Anyway, the Tom is the bad guy in the relationship, and not that they're necessarily they both were weak, but I say no. I mean, when Summer invites him to her engagement party, I mean, come on, she has to know that that's not going to be a good situation for him, and it's just thoughtless and cruel in my opinion. And I mean, it does set up for that great reality versus expectations versus reality sequence, which I love, but I don't know, I just think at the very least Summer is clueless. At the worst, she's mean. So that's my opinion. But yeah, you don't invite your ex to your engagement party especially when it's still kind of raw.
Okay. Yeah, also, a big takeaway I've had from this is that I need to watch 500 Days of Summer, and I need to watch The Way We Were because I haven't watched either.
Oh no!
Shame on me. So add it to the list.
Reva, have you seen 500 Days of Summer?
I have not.
Oh no!
And you haven't seen The Way We Were either. We've got to get on the ball here.
We could have like a Zoom watch party.
Yes.
Yeah, hey,
Rachel can shepherd us through it.
Yes.
Well, we should definitely do a 500 Days of Summer podcast. And I know the listeners understand what I'm saying about Summer and Tom.
Sorry we couldn't support you in that. Like we weren't silent because we didn't agree. We're just like, yep, not saying that movie.
That was a really solid analogy, right? Anyway, but we also of course have Miranda. She runs into Steve, runs away, doesn't pay the poor flower person, and you guess that Steve paid, right? Paid the guy.
Oh yeah, when he just stopped and he looked bewildered. I feel like Steve would give the guy $5 or whatever.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then Steve shows up and he says, "It hurt my feelings. This is me, Steve." Oh, it was so cute. I was like, I love you.
Well, and then obviously they tried to be friends for a dinner, and they couldn't, and they immediately get back together.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, I love that relationship. I love Steve. I have so many thoughts, but
Yeah, he claims, oh, I'm just getting my fire department shirt back.
Yeah.
Sure. And I don't know, he was just super sexy, I thought, in these scenes. Do friends kiss here? You know, all that.
Oh yeah, you're right. Steve did bring his A game. Like I will say also Miranda was so wonderfully vulnerable when she tells him when she gets in and then she starts crying. And there's this shot where Cynthia Nixon is facing away from Steve, and then she turns and she faces him and tells him everything. I don't know. I mean, guys, I know because we've talked about it. I know I sound like a broken record. It's just so upsetting. Not even where their relationship has ended up, but the refusal to acknowledge what they once had. Instead of Miranda saying like, I've grown and changed and things are in a different direction and it's stale, but she sort of goes back and says like, no, I never had it with Steve. It's like, well, that's just not true. And we watched it. We got to see it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Everything that she said. I'm assuming you're referring to what she said about him and Just Like That. I was like, none of that's true. I have proof. Like,
right.
Exactly.
You have proof.
Well, and the idea that Steve would be so unaware of the problems in the marriage, unaware that, I mean, he's not the kind of person who would go 10 years without having sex with his wife. It is ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, they just painted him as an idiot, which made me mad.
Yes, agreed.
Mm-hmm. So then the last plot in this one is you have Samantha, who has a meet cute outside of Prada with a guy, and it turns out he is really big. He's huge. And so that's a challenge, but it turns out Samantha made her very first male friend.
I thought that was cute.
Yes, I was just delighted at this. I actually just thought it was the fact that she's like, oh yeah, it's going to be fun. I've been with big guys before. And then it's like, oh no. And this guy normally, which I know can be very sensitive thing for men, but normally you think a guy is bragging, always just saying it's big, but he's really being honest because this legitimately is a problem for him. And that's it. I actually thought he was kind of sweet and vulnerable too. I enjoyed this whole interaction and plot line.
Yeah, I really liked how they met on the street. And I don't know if you guys watched Melrose Place ever, but he was Bobby Parisi in Melrose Place. Yeah.
Oh,
he's hot. I'm like,
he was also on Young and the Restless for a long time.
213
episodes.
213?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he does have like that soap opera look, I feel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was funny. Oh yeah, on Melrose Place. Look at that. And then he was also on Days of Our Lives. He played Elvis Presley. How random.
Oh wow. I'm sure that was completely realistic portrayal.
Oh. Yeah. But it is interesting that Samantha is not as free-spirited as you'd think by her archetype. She's not really like a hippie. She's actually kind of choosy for somebody who's supposedly so liberated.
Yeah. Well, I think I think she does have standards. And like I remember in season 1 when she thought she was going through menopause, so she like had sex with her creepy neighbor and then like blood on her sheets, and she's like, oh awesome, I'm not going through menopause, bye. So like I think it is also dependent on her mood and her frame of mind, but I do think she does have like a certain look that she prefers in a man, I will say.
Well, yeah, it kind of made me think, was given this episode, would we consider Samantha simple or complicated? I think you got to say complicated, but I think I'd say that for all of these women. So you're right. It's really not a fair delineation.
Yeah.
But, Big says that Natasha was easy.
Yeah.
And that everything was always so hard with them. And that's when she says, your girl is lovely, Hubble.
I love how he says, I don't get it. And she's like, and you never did.
Yes. Okay. So, okay. I look at it's different every time I watch it. I think depending on what frame of mind I'm in. Sometimes I'm like, wow, Carrie dropped the mic and you never did. And then sometimes I'm just picturing Big being like, what does that even mean?
I
Like,
know.
weirdo. This is why it never worked. I don't ever know what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And
So
they were just never on the same page in terms of the relationship. Like she was so much more into it than he was. And that's why it was so hard for him, you know? And so they needed to be on an even level and they just never were.
yeah. Well, oh, there we forgot to talk about. There's this whole thing with Charlotte, with I guess her horse has
Oh, yes.
passed
Yes.
away, and then so she needs to become she needs to get used to a different horse, and so Carrie goes with her for this, and her outfit was so awful. I hated it.
Why
She
are
had
you
that
wearing
terrible
heels?
rolled up jeans that they did in the 90s with the low waist and then you have like a good 6 inches of rolled up jeans. It just looked terrible. I hate it. And then this terrible top, red top. Again, another one of these halter cuffs that I hate.
I think that's all you're
then
putting her in this season.
and then the gold shoes, which I mean, Carrie, you're not an idiot. Why would you wear these shoes to go horseback riding? What?
And then complain that she has horse crap on her shoes. It's like, well,
Yeah.
whose fault is that? We're sneakers. I'm sure you own a pair.
Yeah. Give me a break.
What do Carrie Bradshaw's sneakers look like? Anyway, I want to know. I
Well,
bet they're cute.
Yeah, I mean, we did hear, and just like that, when she says that she bought a pair of Toms,
Oh, yeah.
it's like, who didn't? But yeah, and then Carrie, I mean, Charlotte in that scene, she also looks pretty frumpy, but at least she has appropriate shoes. 90s jeans were unfortunate. You either had those really low hip huggers jeans, or you had the really high ones. Both of them terrible.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
Also, she picks this pink dress to wear for the big date with Big, and it was okay, but I don't think it was a like va boom like that you would want for this kind of a thing, right? Wouldn't you want it to look like your absolute best for this big meetup?
Well, it was lunch. I think it's harder to do if it's lunch like in the middle of the day.
Mhm.
I actually thought she looked amazing, despite what like I think the dress was kind of plain, but she like killed it anyway. I was like,
yeah.
oh, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like Carrie, I think sometimes what she thinks she looks baller in, you're like, oh, sometimes when you're a little bit more simple, it actually looks amazing on you.
Yeah. Yep.
That's true. So, yeah, what would you give this episode 1 to 10? What do you think, Jax?
Oh, gave us one 8.5. I like this one slightly less, although again, it's one of those that is so iconic, especially with this ending. Like I'll never forget this ending. I would say I give this one an 8.
Okay, what about you, Reva? What would you give it?
I would give it probably a 7.
Yeah, I'll go in between you two. I'll give it a 7.5. And it's a pretty good episode. The Steve Miranda stuff is so good. And I think the writing with the Hubble stuff was very well done. So it's a pretty good. I still think the last episode would have been a better season finale, but it's a decent season finale. So
Yeah.
So there we go. We did it.
Rachel, are you wearing what I think you're wearing?
Oh, that's right. I am wearing.
Mine didn't come yet. You look great.
I'm wearing our City Girls Pod merch.
Oh, nice.
Shirt. And you can get it in all different colors and styles, and you can get it on totes and phone cases and anything that you want. So please take a look. There's a sale going on this weekend, 35% off. We'll have all the information in the in the description. So check that out. And all of our merch store is really fun, but we have the City Girls awesome logo designed by Jessica Miller in the merch store. So check that out. And Reva, thank you so much. This was so much fun. We'll definitely have you on again. We had a blast.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I had a blast too. I would love to be on again. It was so much fun.
So why don't you tell people how they can find your blog, and also I don't know if you have any other social media you want to share.
Yeah, so it's just carriebradshawstheworst.com. I also finally made a Facebook page, which is how you found me, I believe.
Yeah.
So that was worth it right there. And then I'm at Reeves, REEVES 526 on Twitter. And I've actually been off Twitter a lot lately because I've been busy, but when I am on Twitter, I usually talk about sports and the Golden Girls, and I post any updates on the blog and just try to keep politics out of everything. So don't have to worry about that. But yeah, it's just would love to chat with anyone who wants to talk about Carrie or the Golden Girls.
Oh, yeah,
my political party is Golden Girls, so that's so 100%.
Perfect. Perfect.
And I was going to ask you too. Do you have I say I'm a Charlotte, Jax is Carrie. Do you have a one that you think you're the most like of the girls?
Gosh, it's hard. I feel like just from a bad at relationships perspective, when I was younger, I would say Carrie, but now I would feel more like Samantha.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. All right, Jax, how can people find you?
At Jacqueline C Tweets on Twitter and Jacqueline Collier on Instagram.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And make sure you're following us at City Girls Pod. I share anytime I find something fun on Sex and the City. I try to share it on there. And so we'd love you to follow us on our Twitter. And you can follow us also at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all over social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your 5-star reviews. It really helps us a lot. And only takes a second of your time, and we would so much appreciate it. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also, as I said, we have our merch store, which has fun City Girls Pod merch, and we have the patron group, which is really fun. We are having this Saturday. Kathy Cloves is our patron. Kathy Cloves is doing our Q&A for this month. She was the writer of It Was Always You and The Christmas Promise, and she doesn't have any social media. So this is your chance to talk to her and ask questions, and any level of patron can be a part of it. So definitely take advantage of that. It's going to be super fun, and all the information's in the description. So thank you again, Reva. It was a blast, and we'll talk to you all next week. Bye, everyone.